Hi, True Crime fans. True Crime Tuesday, flight number 2. It is August 26th. This is our second flight, meaning my second case here on the True Crime Grapevine. I'm Patti Lee, your dyslexic armchair detective. Boy, as if I didn't try to prove it. Okay, so as you may or may not know, if you're on YouTube and you're my subscriber, hi, nice to see you again for flight 2. We're sampling a little bit of the Pinot Grigio here, and we're going to be talking about Orsolya Gaal's case. If you're new, hi. Maybe you're watching because you're interested in the Queen Mom murder case of Orsolya Gaal, or maybe you're just interested in true crime, or maybe you're just bored. Anyway, welcome. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Put any comments you want to hear, anything you'd like to say. Please be kind. Anyways, this is my 10th episode, my second flight to talk about Orsolya Gaal. So let's get into it. Orsolya Gaal, as we talked about last week, was a Queens mom in a nice part. I don't even know why I said nice part of Queens. I don't really know Queens or any of the boroughs because I don't live in New York City. But they said she lived in a gated community and her house looked similar to what my brother's looks like in Shaker Heights, which is a very nice Tudor home. So I'm assuming that, and they said it was worth $2 million, which is probably about the same as a $400,000 house here in Ohio. Or maybe not. But anyways, it looks similar. And I based last week's ideas about what I had to say about how, because people are like, how did the 13-year-old not hear? It looks like a young guy in that video. Assuming that everybody's like, oh, it must be the teenage son, right? And I'm like, no. In these houses, they can get in by the side door. You can go up or down into the kitchen or down into the basement. It's really common layout for these homes. Anyway, so, last week we weren't sure who it was, and I believed right as I was taping that they had mentioned they had a good idea of who it was. Because by this time, they had her phone, and you know, we all know, once they look into electronics, plus they can start looking into, I don't know if you guys know what geofencing is, but stores and for other reasons have a fence around them that tells them whenever a phone enters or exits, and that's how they know how to send you some mail. And that's why people like VPNs, so that they can hide where your signal is coming from so you don't get unsolicited ads. We know businesses are just trying to make it like everybody else, right? But geofencing helps when the law enforcement wants to know who was in an area, like January 6th. That was one way they could tell, because I believe there's a big geofence around the Capitol building, so they knew whose phone had entered. And I think it can do it even when it's off, but I'm not sure, because sometimes there's still something in your phone that has a tag. Not positive it has to be all the way off. But anyway, getting off track again, that ADHD dyslexic thing. Let's wind it back to what we're talking about. We're only on our second case. We are having Pinot Grigio with this case. Although, if we wanted to be true, we would have a Moscow Mule, because as we learned, Orsolya went after she went to, so there was what we thought last week because it had just happened. And when something just happens, you hear a lot of rumors. I mean, there's still a lot of rumors going on. So again, everything I say is from the grapevine, meaning it's a rumor, it's gossip. I try to give you the good scoop. I try to squeeze the, purest of juice of what is true. But as we all know, especially in true crime, you get a muddled, it's the grapevine. One person says something, the second person repeats it, and by the time it gets to me, and by the time I give it to you, it might not be exactly A, what was said, and then B, every day we know a little bit more. All right, so last week they just said she had been talking to a couple men, they thought, and they had hinted that might have something to do with it. Her older son and her husband were out of town in Oregon, and he had tweeted something to somebody who was pro sanctions against Russia. So, and he worked in lithium in New York, and everybody, and by everybody I mean me, but it was like, oh, was he involved in anything, or did somebody want to get at him, but like retaliate for talking, for being like anti-Putin, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so again, turns out, apparently, as far as we know right now, Afra, it's a tale as old as time, right? Apparently, she, and again, not the victim fault. People have affairs. People get sad, bored, don't feel appreciated, just lonely. She is a stay-at-home mom, and her kids were out of the house and not needing her as much. We don't actually know what led to this, but I'm assuming, being a 50-something mom, you've got to really find something like a true crime podcast to fill up your days if you were used to filling them up with small people needing you at every whim. And it's, you might take up knitting, and you might take up true crime podcasting, and you might substitute teach, or you might get bored and get drawn into an illicit affair. I don't know. Okay, so from what it looks like, Orsolya, though, it seems like he was a handyman working on like heating, HVAC, I guess they call it, heating and cooling stuff in their house, it sounded like. And he was working on more than the house, perhaps. And it looks like they had something going on and off for 2 years. Again, your phones will tell on you, people. That and your electronic stuff, it is forever. Because whatever you do digitally, if this can be what we learn, one, we're being geofenced, so people know where you are by your phone. And two, everything you do digitally is on some motherboard somewhere. Computers, like even the cloud is connected to somewhere. Whoever owns the cloud has like a physical server that's holding all the memory of all that stuff. It is somewhere. So don't think like you can do anything, it disappears on your end. It's still out there somewhere, and they can find it. So anyway, yeah, so they tracked back who she was, whatever, and okay, it looked like maybe they couldn't tell exactly who at first. So what we did not know was going on last week was that, again, law enforcement knows what they're doing. And even though we have geofencing and all these interesting digital detectives, there's also just good detective work. Like, hit the ground, do the searches, do the grid search. So they, you might remember she was found in a hockey bag, and it was about, a mile and a half from her house. And there had been pictures of somebody in a hoodie rolling the hockey bag, that it looked like it was her son's hockey bag, and that's what it turned out to be, from their house. And I guess there was a big crime scene in the basement. So somebody had an altercation with her at home. The knife used was also from the home. So this is like a crime of passion. So they knew they were looking. It wasn't like a hit. It wasn't really just something to her, you know what I mean? Unless it was just a real sloppy, you know what I mean? It just seemed wrong. Nothing was missing from the home, so not a burglary. We've all watched Law and Order on TV. We know how this kind of goes, where they look at things. All right, so from where she was found, they did a big search out into the wooded area, because she was found near this big parkway street, but it was also, there's a walking path and all these woods. And in the woods, they found this orange jacket shoved into a tree full, and it was all bloody. And then as they were canvassing, this guy was walking around. I mean, it's not funny. Sorry. It's not funny. It really isn't. But it's funny, not funny, haha, but funny weird, how close these detective shows, and when you hear things, how close it really comes to real life. They say criminals can't stay away from what they did. You know what I mean? So this guy was walking around and wandering around, and he had a bandaged hand, and they spoke with him, and they found, you know, they're also at the same time, I guess they didn't just like find him, but they're looking at surveillance as it goes on. And anyway, this man, David Bonilla, sort of vomited up what happened, I guess. I mean, it didn't sound like he was very good. Like, he didn't lawyer up at first. He told the police. He went with them. He told them what happened. I mean, his hands all... I mean, if you stab somebody, you are using a knife. Blood, it gets slippery. And the knife was, like, out of the steak block. I mean, it was just right... Like you just get in your kitchen. You know, they had a fight, and he explained, okay, so I went over there, she let me in, we had a fight, she said go downstairs. That's what he said, that they then went downstairs to argue more, but it sounds like they were arguing in the kitchen. He grabs a knife because she's asking him to leave a number of times. Also, interestingly, on her, and this was one of the clues that we didn't know right away, because why would they tell us? There was a note that said, get a new handyman, like in capital letters with an exclamation point. He was the old handyman, so I'm assuming that didn't help the fight. Anyways, he explains it his way. Of course, he also explained that he had been to an urgent center to have his hand looked at, and the cuts were so bad that it wouldn't stop bleeding. They sent him to Bellevue Hospital. Interestingly enough, back in the 50s, and I think it's down to the 60s and maybe 70s until Reaganomics got rid of all the state mental hospitals, but it was known for being a mental hospital. So it's ironic that he ended up there. Anyways, they found him going back to his house after all this happened, but in the meantime, they're putting together pieces of the puzzles, finding things, seeing somebody that looks like him. He was 5'5", so when people say, oh, it looks like a slight person, well, he's 5'5", which isn't super tall for men. Anyway, he sort of tells, now it appears that he has been given, as we're all due, representation in court, regardless of our status of being an American or not, because you will hear he was, and I believe he might be predominantly Spanish speaking, I'm not exactly sure, but they said he didn't speak any English, I believe, in court. But they're making, some people need a drink, are making a big deal of, oh, he came from Mexico 20 years ago, and he, you know, that whole, I am sorry. Hurting people is bad enough. I'm not gonna, I don't think there's anything to know, if you looked at the proportion of people who immigrate either willingly or like are brought here as babies, and aren't, technically Americans, but they've been here 20 years. I don't know, actually, so if he's here 20 years, but he's a 20-year-old, so he came as an adult, not as a child, but still, I don't want to, look at me, I don't want to get into it, I just sort of got into. But what I'm saying is, I don't think his status of legality or his country of origin has anything to do with what he did. I think he was a 44-year-old mixed up man who was, like most middle-aged people, looking at his life, and it wasn't turning out how he thought, and he was distracting himself. Look at how I'm just totally making up a psychological background story, but was, probably like Orsolya. You get to a certain point in your life, and if you don't have hobbies or something that you love doing for you, people do turn to other people to fill up that, like, death is just waiting out there, and what am I supposed to do? What does it all mean? It's a distraction to have a fling, or even just a flirty, or just a flirt. I mean, the police know a lot more. I don't even know how far their relationship was. Maybe they just flirted. Maybe they just kissed. But whatever, he was much more invested in it. And he had also recently, he was married, but they were separated. And it wasn't clear how soon that separation happened. But if one person separates because they think they're getting with the other person, and then the other person, who also happens to have a different, probably a little bit more advanced lifestyle, says, you know what, no, this was like, you were just the handyman, you were just the fling, could set somebody off. So we don't know, but we don't know anything. All we know is his side, because he's the only person left to tell it. And we'll hear more about her side when this all comes up. Anyway, so what do we know? We know that this story seems to be due to the same thing a lot of these stories are. People aren't very good at hearing no, and they lose their mind and do crazy things, and it is enough to make you want to drink. All right, so we will hear more. He will be back in court. Let's see. He's being charged up to, it's second-degree murder. It's second degree because it was a crime of passion. First degree is premeditated. So, but it's still 25 years to life. His lawyers are saying, let me see right now. So Melinda Katz is the Queens District Attorney, the DA there in Queens. She is the one doing this case. He was arraigned last week, late Thursday. He did not enter a plea. If you remember from, we'll talk about next, the Vallow Daybell case, you can do three things. You can enter a plea of guilty or not guilty yourself. You can have your lawyers do it, or you can remain silent. And then the court just says, okay, I guess not guilty, because that's where everything starts. That's the, like, default. So he did not make a plea. He remained silent. And right now, they are not, let's see, I'm trying to see what the attorneys, I thought the attorneys, it just said, so he went back to court today for less than a minute. His lawyer said that he would not testify in front of the grand jury. So to get indicted for the crime, either a grand jury does it or the DA does it, if you remember that from discussions we had about a couple of the past cases. Obviously, it looks like they're going to go the grand jury route, and since he had seemingly confessed to the police last week, they thought maybe he'd do it, and now he's got a lawyer, which everybody is given a lawyer in our system. So, and the lawyer must watch Scott Reich and said, you know, you're not talking, dude. Zip it. And so he's not going to incriminate himself. So obviously, I don't know what's going to happen, but he's fighting it. There. Speaking of Scott Reich, hi Scott. Scott he gives you a libertarian defense perspective, crime talk. He updates every night and does a live on Tuesday as well as a Patreon on Tuesdays. And on Saturday, he does like a review. I think Sunday might be the only day he doesn't upload. So if you're into somebody and that's my defense perspective. So again, hi, if you're new, like and subscribe. But, and if you're old, you know this, but I like to, if you think of it as like a Venn diagram, I like to get everybody's different perspectives. I like to get like the victim's perspective. I like to get like a feminist, or a male, or like a law enforcement perspective and a judicial, like as many perspectives as possible, because I figure like Venn diagrams, if you lay all those on top of each other, maybe in the middle there's like the closest thing that might be to truth, and I'm saying truth as with a little t because everybody's truth is a little bit different because we all experience reality a little bit different. Sorry, it's my educational psychology background. But when it comes to evidence and the perspective of whom we should hold responsible, it helps to look at all those different perspectives. And lawyers, people don't like them, but man, they're very important. And you want somebody who is going to go on your side as hard as someone like Iris Eaton or Scott Wright, or, you know, I would like Lori Hellis. Any of those lawyers that we hear, all of them are give a strong perspective so that we can know sometimes what we feel emotionally and morally isn't the same thing as legally, and it's very frustrating. And even you'll hear law enforcement people talk, and their perspective from like a defense attorney is a little bit different again, but none of them are invalid. That's why I like, and I try to give you a little bit of all of them. I'm not saying like I love everything any of them say, like without any question. I always question everybody, but there you have it. Okay, that was case 2. We will hear more about Orsolya Gaal's case and David Bonalla, who is unfortunately her ex who exed her. It's a sad case. We'll hear more about it. There'll be more rumors. Oh, let me just throw this in here. Again, this is complete rumor, and I'm not sure I believe it because, again, it comes from one single person, an ex-Starbucks employee from the area on Austin Street said, oh, he came in all the time and he was writing song lyrics because he imagined himself an artist, and he was flirting inappropriately and leaving love notes. The police said they do have what's that called when someone bothers you like that legally? Like harassment claims that they have, but they don't think it matches him. So perhaps the ex-Starbucks employee is mixing up this guy with another creeper guy. I don't know. That is totally unsubstantiated, and it came from one source. And it was reported mostly by tabloids. So I'm taking that with a grain of salt. We do know, though, that he was a handyman, and that's how he knew her. And he was separated from his wife. And perhaps he put too much of what he thought his life was going to be onto her. And when she took it away, he took her away. What can we take away from it? Try not to have affairs with people who work for you. And try to break up with people and stay broken up, or at least don't let them into your house at 12:30 at night after you've had a drink and maybe aren't, you know, like just saying don't come in, don't come over. I don't know. It's not her fault, but what can we take away from it? When you break up with somebody, break up with somebody. And don't let them in your house ever again. All right. Flight 3 will be coming at you next.